You know how some days just feel ordinary? Like nothing about them tells you something's coming. That's the thing about the day I'm going to tell you about. It started boring. It started so normal that I almost didn't go out at all. But I did. And what I saw that afternoon near Hyde Park in the middle of London, I still think about it. I think about it more than I'd like to admit. Let me take you back there. Stay with me. Because the moment it turned fast. Okay, so. It was a Tuesday. I remember it was a Tuesday because I'd taken the day off work and I almost never do that midweek. My sister had flown in from abroad, first time in London for her, and she had this list. You know the type. A folded piece of paper with about 40 things written on it in tiny handwriting. Buckingham Palace, the Eye, the Tower, a specific bakery somebody told her about, the guards. Oh, she really wanted to see the guards. She kept saying it on the train. I want to see one up close, the ones who don't move. Are they real? Like, do they actually not move? I told her, yeah, they're real, and yeah, they really don't move, and no, you can't make them laugh. Plenty of people have tried. She didn't believe me. I could tell. She had that look. The look of somebody who's already planning to test it. The weather that morning was that gray London kind. Not raining, not sunny. Just flat. The sky looked like an old bedsheet. Warm enough that you didn't need a heavy coat, cool enough that you wanted one anyway. The air smelled like wet pavement and bus fumes and somewhere coffee. We walked a lot. We always walked too much in London. By the time we'd worked through half her list, it was early afternoon and her feet were killing her. And we ended up over near Hyde Park, by one of the entrances where the royal stuff is, where you sometimes get the mounted ones and the foot guards depending on the day. And there he was. A guard standing his post. Now I want to describe him properly, because later on the way he stood became the whole thing, the whole point. He was tall, not freakishly but tall. The red tunic, the bearskin hat, that big black fur hat that makes them all look about 8 feet, the rifle held just so. He stood on this raised stone block, this little platform, with a black and gold railing kind of marking out his space. There was a sign. There's always a sign. Do not touch. Keep your distance. Something like that. And he was completely still. I mean still, not statue pretending to be still, properly still. The kind of still that makes your own body feel fidgety just looking at it. My sister stopped about 10 feet away and just stared. He's breathing, right? She whispered. Yeah, he's breathing. He doesn't look like he's breathing. There was already a small crowd. There always is. Maybe 15, 20 people, tourists mostly. A family with 2 little kids, a group of lads late teens with a selfie stick, an older couple, a woman with one of those enormous cameras with the long lens, people drifting up, taking a photo, drifting off. The guard didn't react to any of them, eyes forward, jaw set, like the whole crowd didn't exist, like he was somewhere else entirely. My sister got her photo, stood next to him, big grin, peace sign, the whole bit. He didn't flinch. She came back over to me beaming like she'd met a celebrity. Okay, she said, I get it now, that's actually unreal. And honestly, if it had ended there, this would just be a nice little story about a guard who didn't move. A nothing story, a holiday memory. But it didn't end there. Because there was this other guy. I'd noticed him for a few minutes before anything happened. You know how sometimes a person stands out from a crowd and you can't say why. It's just a feeling, a wrongness. He was maybe in his 30s. Loud shirt, one of those bright tropical print ones, palm trees and flamingos, the kind people buy specifically for a holiday and never wear again. Sunglasses pushed up on his head even though there was no sun. A drink in his hand. Not coffee. One of those tall cans, the kind that's basically a cocktail in a tin, and from the way he was talking I'd guess it wasn't his first of the day. He had a couple of friends with him, 2 other guys, and they were egging him on. That's the part that stuck with me. They weren't stopping him, they were filming him. Phones up, laughing, go on, do it. And he kept getting closer to the guard. First, it was just standing next to him for a photo. Fine, normal, everyone does that. Then he leaned in, put his arm halfway round the guard's shoulders, not touching but close. His friends howled. The guard didn't move. Then he started talking to him, right up in his face. Oi oi mate, smile, come on, give us a smile. That kind of thing, slurred a bit, spittle when he laughed. The guard didn't move. And I felt the crowd start to change. You could feel it, that shift. People stopped enjoying it. The little kid's mum quietly steered them away. The older couple frowned. The woman with the big camera lowered it. Nobody likes watching someone be cruel for laughs, and that's what this was turning into. It had gone from a joke to something with an edge. My sister leaned into me. Why doesn't he just tell him to back off? They're not allowed to react, I said. Not unless they have to, it's the whole point. Discipline, they've got procedures. There's a thing they do, they stamp, they shout a warning, but they don't lose it. They're trained not to. That's insane, she said. I'd have decked him by now. So would I, honestly, so would most people. That's what made it so striking. This guy was being a complete idiot and the guard just stood there, took it, eyes forward, like a rock in a river. Here's where it started to tip. The loud guy, flamingo shirt, he wanted a better reaction. The give us a smile thing wasn't landing. His friends' laughs were getting thinner. You could see he was the type who needs the audience, and the audience was getting bored, so he had to escalate to keep it going. So he reached out and flicked the guard's hat. Just a little flick. The bearskin tapped the front of it with his finger. And the crowd went, oh. That low collective sound a crowd makes when somebody crosses a line. The guard still didn't move. But and I noticed this, I was close enough, something changed in his eyes, just a flicker, a tightening. He was aware. Of course he was aware. He'd been aware the whole time. That's the thing people don't get. The stillness isn't blankness, it's control. It's a man choosing, second by second, not to react. And that's so much harder than reacting. I felt my own stomach tighten. Because I knew, the way you sometimes just know, that this wasn't going to fizzle out. Flamingo shirt had tasted a reaction, that little flicker, and he wanted more. He's going to do something stupid, I said to my sister, quietly. He already is, she said. No, worse. And then a few things happened close together, and I'll try to slow it down, because in the moment it was fast. Flamingo shirt grabbed the rifle. Not snatched, but put his hand on it, on the guard's weapon, wrapped his fingers round the barrel near where the guard was holding it and gave it a little tug, laughing, looking back at his mates. Here, let's have a go, let's see this thing. And that was it. The guard moved. I've never seen anything happen that fast and that controlled at the same time. There was no flailing, no panic. 1 second he was a statue and the next he had snapped, and I mean snapped, like a whip, into a completely different mode. He stamped. The boot came down on the stone with a crack that I swear I felt in my chest, and he shouted. I won't get the words exactly right. It was loud, it was sharp, it was a command, the kind of voice that comes from somewhere deep and trained, the kind of voice that doesn't ask, it tells. Something like stand back. But louder than those words look on a page. Much louder. It cut straight through the noise of the crowd, through the traffic, through everything. Flamingo shirt jumped about a foot in the air. You should have seen his face. The grin just fell off it. All that bravado, gone in a half second. He let go of the rifle and stumbled backwards and nearly went over, and his can of drink dropped and fizzed all over the pavement. His friends weren't laughing anymore. The phones were still up, of course they were. They kept filming, people always do, but the laughing had stopped dead. The guard had repositioned. Rifle across his body now presented a defensive stance, every line of him saying no further. And his face, I'll never forget it, his face wasn't angry. That's what got me. You'd expect anger, it wasn't. It was harder than anger. It was absolutely, totally certain. A man who knew exactly what he was. Exactly what he was protecting. And exactly where the line was. And then just as fast, the crowd noise came rushing back in, and everything got chaotic, and that's where it really kicked off. Because here's the thing I haven't told you yet. There were other people around. Of course there were. And one of them, I didn't clock him until this exact moment, was a police officer. Armed. The proper ones, the ones with the kit, the ones you see near anything royal or governmental in London. He'd been further back near the gate, doing what they do, watching everything, looking like he wasn't watching anything. The shout, that command from the guard, it wasn't only a warning to Flamingo Shirt. I understood this later when I read about it, but I half understood it even then. That kind of shout in that kind of place, it's also a signal. It tells everyone else who needs to know. Something's wrong here, eyes on this spot. And the officer was moving before Flamingo Shirt had even finished stumbling. Quick, calm, not running but covering ground fast, one hand up, the other near his belt. Right, step away from the guard, now. And Flamingo Shirt, drunk, embarrassed, suddenly very aware that this had stopped being funny, did this thing where he half raised his hands and started babbling. It was a joke, mate. It was just a joke. Hands where I can see them, step back, you phone down. His friends scattered a bit. You could see them doing the maths. The maths of, do we stay loyal to our idiot mate, or do we suddenly not know him? A couple of them backed off, found themselves very interested in the pavement. And in the middle of all this, the officer, the drunk guy, the scattering friends, the crowd buzzing, the guard had gone still again. That's the bit that gives me chills, even now. He'd done his part. He'd held the line, he'd given the warning, he'd protected his post, and the second the threat was being handled by someone whose job that part was, he went back to being a statue, rifle back to the shoulder, eyes forward, stillness. Like nothing had happened. My sister grabbed my arm, her nails actually dug in a bit. Did you see that? Did you see how fast he? I saw it. That was the scariest thing I've ever. How is he just standing there again? How is he? That's the job, I said, and I meant it more than I'd meant anything all day. That's literally the whole job. Now you'd think that's the climax. The drunk grabs the rifle, the guard snaps, the police move in. Big moment, and it was a big moment. But it wasn't the moment. The moment came after, and to get to it, I have to tell you about the sound we heard about 90 seconds later. Because while the officer was getting Flamingo Shirt sorted, and he was sorted, hands behind, being walked off to the side, all the fight drained out of him. Just a sad, damp guy in a Flamingo Shirt now, his big day out collapsing around him. While all that was happening, something else was happening. Across the park, past the trees, somewhere over toward the busy roads. A sound. I want to describe this carefully because it's important, and because I've replayed it 1,000 times. It wasn't a bang at first. That's the strange thing people get wrong. In films, a bomb is just bang and then chaos. In real life, and I learned this the hard way that day, there's a fraction of a second before where the air just goes wrong, where the pressure changes, where some animal part of your brain, some part older than language, goes cold and says down, get down, before your thinking brain has caught up at all. And then the sound came. A deep, flat, enormous crump, not sharp, heavy. You felt it in your feet through the pavement before you fully heard it. Birds went up off every tree at once, this huge, messy explosion of wings and noise. Car alarms started, a chorus of them, one after another after another. And then, for one full second, the whole world went silent. You know that silence, when something so big happens that everyone's brain just stops, where nobody screams yet because nobody's caught up. That second. And then it broke. And then everyone was screaming. I'm going to stop part one here, right on that second, because what happened next, what that guard did next, is the part I really came here to tell you. The part that, honestly, is the reason I'm telling this story at all. But before I go on, I want you to sit with this image for a moment. A man in a red tunic and a big black hat, standing on a stone block. A crowd in chaos around him. A drunk being led away, birds in the sky, car alarms wailing, smoke now starting to rise somewhere past the trees, gray-black climbing. And in the middle of all of it, one still point. Him, not moving. Not yet. Let me bring you right back to that second. The silence. The whole world holding its breath after that deep, flat crump rolled across the park. Birds in the air. Car alarms starting to scream. Smoke beginning to climb past the trees, off toward the roads. And then the second broke, and the screaming came. I want to tell you something honest. Something I'm not proud of, but I'm going to say it because if I dress this up it stops being true, and the whole point is that it's true. I froze. I'm not a hero. I want you to know that going in. When that sound hit, my body just locked. My legs went strange. My mouth went dry in an instant, properly dry, like all the spit had vanished. My brain was just static, white noise. I remember staring at the smoke and thinking in this stupid flat way, that smoke, why is there smoke, like a child working out a puzzle? That's what shock does. It makes you slow and stupid right when you most need to be fast and clever. My sister was screaming my name. I could hear it, but it was far away, like through water. She was pulling at my sleeve. We have to go, we have to go. And around us the crowd had become a thing, not people anymore, a thing. A panicking animal made of 200 bodies, all moving at once, all moving differently, and that's the dangerous part. They weren't all running the same way. Some ran toward the smoke because they didn't know yet where it came from. Some ran away. Some just stood like me, frozen. A pushchair got knocked. Someone went down. I heard a kid wailing, that high lost wail of a kid who's lost a hand in a crowd. It was, in about 4 seconds, completely out of control. And in the middle of it, that still point. The guard. Now here's what I need you to understand, and it took me a long time to understand it properly, because in the moment I just saw what I saw, I didn't know the why of it. The guard could have run. He's a person. He's a young man under a big hat. He'd heard the same sound I'd heard, felt the same wrongness in the air, and every animal instinct in him would have been screaming the same thing mine was screaming. Move, get away, survive. He didn't. He stayed on his post. And at first, I'll be honest, at first that almost made it worse, because part of my panicking brain went, why is he just standing there? Doesn't he get it? Run, you idiot. I genuinely thought that. For a second I thought the stillness had become a kind of stupidity. A man so trained to not move that he couldn't move even when he should. I was wrong, so wrong, and the next 60 seconds showed me exactly how wrong. Because he started doing something. Not running, working. He came off the block, controlled, fast, deliberate, and he didn't bolt, he positioned. And his voice came out again, that same enormous trained voice that had stopped the drunk dead, except now it wasn't a warning. It was an instruction, and it was aimed at all of us. This way, keep moving, away from the trees. This way, don't run, walk, keep moving, this way. And here's the thing about a voice like that, in a moment like that. A panicking crowd is looking desperately, without even knowing it, for one thing. One single thing. Somebody who knows what they're doing. Somebody who isn't panicking. Because if even one person isn't panicking, then maybe, just maybe, it's survivable and your brain grabs onto that like a hand in deep water. And there he was, the one person in that whole churning mess who wasn't panicking, standing tall, red against the gray, pointing, direction, a clear, hard, certain voice cutting through the chaos. And people turned toward it. I saw it happen. I felt it happen in my own body. That voice reached through the static in my head and switched something back on. My legs unlocked. My sister was still pulling my sleeve, and suddenly I could move with her, and we moved the way he was pointing, away from the trees, away from the smoke, and so did dozens of others, because he'd given the animal a direction. That's what he did. In the worst moment, he gave 200 panicking strangers a direction. And a direction is everything. A direction is the difference between a crowd that flows and a crowd that crushes. But he didn't just point and leave it at that. That would have been enough. That alone would have been more than most people could manage. He kept working. There was the pushchair I told you about, the one that got knocked. The mum had gone down with it, tangled the buggy on its side, the baby still strapped in but tipped, and the mum was being shoved and stepped around because that's what a panicking crowd does. It doesn't mean to. It just doesn't see you. He got to her. I watched him cut across the flow, across it, against all those moving bodies, which is the hardest direction to move in. And he reached down and pulled the buggy upright with one hand, baby and all, and got the other hand under the mum's arm and had her on her feet before she'd even fully understood what was happening. And he turned her, physically turned her body, the way you'd turn a frightened animal, and pointed her down the safe line with the others. Go. That way. Go. And she went. He didn't pause, he didn't look for thanks. He'd already turned to the next thing. The next thing was the lost kid, the wailing one. A little boy, maybe 5, 6, frozen exactly the way I'd been frozen, planted in the middle of the flow, screaming for a mum he couldn't see. And people were parting around him like water round a stone, nobody stopping. Everybody's own fear too loud in their own ears to hear his. The guard scooped him up. One arm. Just lifted him clean off the ground onto his hip, the way you'd carry your own kid, and the boy clung to him, to this enormous stranger in a fur hat, clung like he'd known him his whole life. Because kids know, kids can feel who's safe, and he held that boy and kept directing the crowd with his other hand and his voice, all at the same time, and he was scanning, his eyes going across the crowd, and I realized he was looking for the mum. I need to slow down here, because this part undid me a little. While I was getting myself and my sister to the edge, to safety, to the railing where it opened out and the crush eased, while I was doing the bare minimum of just saving the two of us, that man was doing 5 things at once, and not one of them was about himself. Direction, the mum, the buggy, the lost boy, scanning for the mother, voice steady the entire time, steady, not a wobble in it. And the whole while the smoke kept climbing behind him, and nobody knew yet if there was going to be a second one. That's the part I keep coming back to. Because the worst fear in those situations, the fear that empties out the bravest people, it's not the first bang. It's the waiting for the second. The not knowing. The thought that says the next one could be right here, right now, under your feet. And he stood in the middle of that not knowing, holding a stranger's child, and he did not break. I found out later that's a real thing they're trained for. The second device. The way attacks are sometimes designed, one to draw the crowd, one for where the crowd runs. He knew that. He'd have known that better than anyone there. He knew the maths of it, and he stood in it anyway and did his job, which in that moment had stopped being guard a building and become get these people out alive. He found the mum. I saw the exact moment. She'd been pushed almost to where we were, near the railing, and she was screaming a name, a boy's name, turning in circles, that specific terror of a parent who's lost a child in a crowd, which is a sound I hope you never have to hear, because it's not like other screaming, it comes from somewhere else. And the guard's voice cut across the whole thing, calling not the boy's name, he didn't know it, but calling to her, loud, sharp, ma'am, ma'am. I have him, I have your boy, here. And he lifted the kid a little higher so she could see. This little boy held up over the heads of the crowd in the arms of a man in a red tunic. And she saw, and the sound she made. I can't describe the sound she made. She got to them. He passed the boy down into her arms, careful even then, even in all that chaos, careful the way you'd hand over something irreplaceable, and she folded around the kid and just dropped to a crouch, holding him, shaking, and the guard put one hand on her shoulder for a half second, just enough, and then he was up and turning back into the crowd because there were still people to move. He never said his own name, never asked hers, never asked the boys. Just here, I have your boy, and then back to work. By now the proper response was kicking in. You could hear it. Sirens, layers of them coming from every direction, that London sound of the whole city's emergency machine waking up and pointing itself at one spot. More police. The armed ones. People in high-vis. The systems were arriving, the way they do, faster than you'd believe, and the crowd was thinning where we were, the crush easing, people getting out to the open ground and the streets beyond. The guard handed off. That's the word for it. As the police flooded in and started doing what police do, cordons, directions, the machinery of it, he handed off his little patch of chaos to them the way he'd handed off the drunk earlier. Same calm. Same lack of fuss. He told an officer something, pointed back toward the trees, toward the smoke, gave him what he knew, and the officer nodded and it became theirs. And then, and this is the bit that I think about more than the explosion, more than any of it. He went back. Not to safety, back toward his post. Back toward the smoke. Because that was where he was supposed to be. Because the threat wasn't over and his post still existed, and somebody had to hold it, and as far as he was concerned, that somebody was him. I remember my sister and I were at the railing by then, safe, gulping air, both of us shaking, and she was crying and I had my arm round her, and we both just watched him walk back the wrong way through a crowd running the right way. This lone red figure moving toward the smoke, and I remember thinking, clear as anything, cutting right through the fear. I will never forget this man. And I never have. Now I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, okay, but a bomb went off, people must have been hurt. This isn't a feel-good story. You can't just make it a hero story. You're right, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. I'm going to tell you what really happened, the whole of it, in part 3. What the explosion actually was, who got hurt and who didn't, what happened to Flamingo's shirt, and the thing I found out weeks later about the guard that changed how I understood the entire day. Because there's a detail at the end of this, a small one, and it's the realest thing in the whole story. But for now, I'll leave you with him. Walking back toward the smoke. While everyone else ran, so let me finish this properly. Because I owe you the truth, all of it, not just the heroic shape of it. We stood at that railing for a long time, longer than felt real. Time does a strange thing in moments like that, it stretches and folds. I genuinely couldn't tell you if we stood there 10 minutes or an hour. My sister had stopped crying and gone quiet, which was somehow worse. We just held on to each other and watched the city's response build and build around the smoke. And slowly, over the next while, the truth of what had actually happened started to filter through. From the police, from the people around us, from the news on people's phones, because of course people were already filming and refreshing and reading. Here's what it was. It wasn't the kind of attack everybody's mind had jumped to, including mine, including, I think, everybody who heard that sound. There'd been a vehicle near one of the busy roads on the far side past the trees, and there'd been some kind of failure, a fuel-related thing, a fire that found something it shouldn't have. It became a real serious explosion, big enough to throw out that pressure wave we'd all felt, big enough to do real damage, big enough that for a long time that day nobody, not us, not the police, not the guard, knew whether it was an accident or something deliberate. And that's the part people don't understand when they say, oh, it was only an accident so it doesn't count. It counts. Because in the moment nobody knew. The guard didn't know. The police didn't know. For all anyone in that crowd could tell, it was the first of many. And everything everybody did, the running, the panic, and the guard standing in the middle of it doing his job, all of it happened inside that not knowing. The bravery isn't smaller because it turned out to be an accident. The bravery is exactly the same size. Because at the time it could have been anything. He held the line not knowing, that's the whole thing. People were hurt. I won't dress that up. Several people near where it happened were hurt, some badly. I found out later over the following days the way you do in pieces. Some of it was hard to read. There were people whose ordinary Tuesday became the worst day of their lives, and no story I tell makes that smaller, and I'm not going to pretend it does. But here's the thing that the official account said weeks later, when it was all pieced together. On the park side, our side, the side with the guard, there were no deaths. None. In a crowd that size, in a panic that severe, with a crush that nearly happened more than once, that's not luck. That's not only luck. A crush in a panicking crowd kills people. It really does. It's one of the most dangerous things that can happen to a group of human beings. And it didn't happen on our side that day. Because somebody gave the crowd a direction. I'm not saying he saved every single person. I'm not building him into something he wasn't. I'm saying that the difference between a crowd that flows and a crowd that crushes is sometimes one calm voice, and that day on that side, that voice was his. The people who study these things, who look at how crowds move and why people die in them, they'll tell you the same. Direction saves lives. He gave direction. The mum and the little boy got out. I know that for certain because I saw them on the far side later, the boy on her hip, both of them alive, both of them held. That's not nothing. In fact, I've come to think it's close to everything. You want to know what happened to Flamingo Shirt? I'll tell you. It's not satisfying in the way you might want, and that's sort of the point too. When the explosion happened, the police had already had him, hands behind, being walked off. And in the chaos that followed, in all that flood of emergency response, he was just folded into it, dealt with. I heard secondhand that he was properly cautioned over the rifle thing. Touching a guard, interfering with the weapon, drunk and disorderly. There are real offenses there, and he'd committed several of them in front of a lot of cameras. But here's the bit that stuck with me. Somebody who was nearby told me, and I believe them because it fits everything else about that day, that as Flamingo Shirt was being walked off, after the bang, white-faced and stone-cold sober now, all the bravado gone, he was crying. Genuinely crying. Not I'm in trouble crying, something else. Like the whole thing had finally landed on him at once, what he'd done, where he was, how close everything had just come to being unimaginably worse, and he just crumpled under it. I don't tell you that to make you feel sorry for him. I tell you because I think there's something true in it. He came to a place where real people do a real, deadly serious job, and he treated it like a theme park. Like the guard was an attraction. Like the not moving was a game to beat. And then the world reminded him in the most violent way possible that none of it was a game. That the seriousness he'd been mocking was the exact seriousness that, 90 seconds later, kept a crowd alive. I hope he never forgets it. I genuinely hope it changed him. I'll never know. Now, the detail I promised you. The thing I found out weeks later that reorganized the whole day in my head. Because here's what I kept wrestling with afterward. I kept thinking, how? How does a person stand still while a drunk idiot grabs his rifle, and then 90 seconds later run a one-man rescue operation in the middle of a possible bombing, and then walk back toward the smoke, and never, at any point, look frightened or angry or anything except completely in control? I thought it had to be that he was just made different, built braver, some special kind of person who doesn't feel fear the way the rest of us do. And then weeks later there was a small thing, a short piece, a local thing, an interview, the kind that barely gets noticed. One of the guards who'd been on duty that day spoke briefly, anonymously. I can't even be totally certain it was him, but it lined up. The post, the timing, the details, I think it was him. I've chosen to believe it was him. And the thing he said, and I'm telling you this in my own words because the exact phrasing isn't the point. The meaning is the point. The thing he said was that he'd been terrified. The whole time terrified. That when the bang went off, every part of him wanted to run, same as everybody. That his hands were shaking the entire time he was directing the crowd, and he was just glad of the gloves so nobody could see. That he wasn't fearless. That he'd never been fearless. That the training isn't about not being afraid, it can't make you not afraid. Nothing can. The training is about what you do with the fear. About having something to hold on to when the fear comes. A job, a post, a line, a direction, so that the fear has somewhere to go that isn't running. And he said the thing I've never been able to shake. He said, And this is the bit. This is the whole reason I tell this story. He said the post isn't the building. The post isn't the palace or the gate or the stone block. He said the post is the people. That standing your post means standing between the people and whatever's coming, whatever it is, even when you're terrified, especially when you're terrified, because the whole point of you being there is so that on the day it actually matters, you're the one who doesn't run. I think about that more than almost anything anyone's ever said to me. Because I'd had it backwards, you see. I'd spent that whole day, right up until the bang, half thinking like flamingo shirt, if I'm honest, like the crowd, like everyone, that the stillness was the strange part, the party trick, the thing to test and photograph and try to break. And it was exactly the opposite. The stillness was never the trick. The stillness was the training. The stillness was a man, every single day, on every single ordinary boring shift, practicing being the one who doesn't move when everyone else does, so that on the one day it mattered, the one day in 1,000, he'd already know how. The drunk thought the discipline was something to mock. 90 seconds later, that same discipline was the only thing standing between 200 panicking people and a much worse day. That's not a coincidence. That's the entire point. We went home that evening, my sister and me, and we didn't talk much on the train. She didn't get to the bakery on her list. None of the rest of the list happened. It didn't matter. Halfway home she said, very quietly, "I'm never going to make fun of one of those guards again." And I said, "No, me neither." She flew home a few days later. We still talk about it. Every now and then, out of nowhere, one of us will message the other just 2 words, "the guard," and the other one always knows exactly what it means. So that's it. That's the day a bomb went off near Hyde Park, and a tourist crossed a line he should never have crossed, and a man in a red tunic and a big black hat did the most ordinary, extraordinary thing I've ever seen a human being do. He stood his post. He was terrified, and he stood his post anyway. And the next time you see one of them, still as a statue, eyes forward, while some tourist waves a hand in front of his face trying to make him laugh, I want you to remember something. That stillness isn't emptiness. It's a promise. It's a man telling you, without a single word, whatever comes, I'm not going to be the one who runs. And most days, thank God, nothing comes, and the promise is never tested, and he just stands there in the gray London afternoon while 100 phones go up. But some days something comes, and on those days you'll be very, very glad he kept the promise.